Nithyananda, you media clowns try to bury us, but every shovel you swig digs your own grave. First, you scream the supreme pontiff of Hinduism is fake until he sets you up with the power manifestation sign. Strike one. Then you yelled Kailasa is a sham till he proved it's rock solid with sovereign territories worldwide. Strike two. Next, you sneered that Kailasa's UN presence is fake. Now 22 United Nations reports slap that lie in your face. Strike 3. You're out. Everything you call fake, we prove real. Your fake breaking news, it's backfiring. Those who don't believe us see your headlines, dig deeper and realize the Supreme Pontiff's got powers. They believe us now, not you. You're not just failing, you are our megaphone. In Bolivia, your publication attacking Kailasa betrays journalistic integrity and assaults indigenous sovereignty. Your false characterizations are deliberate colonial tactic designed to strip indigenous nations of fundamental rights. We will not be silenced or delegitimized by media outlets serving neo-colonial interests. By labeling Kailasa fictitious, you attack the self-determination right of every indigenous people. While pretending to advocate for indigenous rights, you actively undermine the very legal protections indigenous communities depend on. Your hypocrisy is obvious, claiming to defend communities while attacking their constitutional right to diplomatic autonomy. This anti-indigenous position reveals your true agenda, perpetuating colonial control mechanism that denies indigenous nations their rightful place internationally. You have failed basic standards of ethical journalism, deliberately omitting facts about Kailasa's legitimate diplomatic relations, exposing blatant bias against indigenous Hindu communities, presenting a distorted narrative excluding Kailasa's position, using dehumanizing language calling a sovereign nation fictitious, refusing to correct inaccuracies when presented with contradicting facts, publishing without seeking our perspective proves your intent to misrepresent Kailasa. Your most disturbing agenda is neo-colonialism disguised as advocacy. While claiming to defend indigenous communities, you delegitimize their right to sovereign diplomatic relations. This isn't protection, this is paternalism. Article 30, 2.4 of Bolivia's constitution guarantees indigenous people the right to self-determination and territoriality. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which is under the Bolivia's law number 3760, affirms Article 3. Indigenous people have the right to self-determination. Bolivia lacks authority to recognize nations. Even the United Nations itself lacks authority to recognize states. It can only admit members. Recognition is a political act, not a legal prerequisite for statehood. Kailasa meets criteria for statehood under the Montevideo Convention. A permanent population united by common cultural heritage. A defined territory with historical continuity. A functional government with established institutions. Demonstrated capacity for international relationship. Montevideo Convention establishes the political existence of the state is independent of recognition by other states. This is settled international law. Let us be absolutely clear. The agreement in question were between a United States-based Hindu organization and indigenous Bolivian communities, not Kailasa directly. These agreements are legitimate, transparent and comply with international law. Every treaty between this US-based Hindu organization and Bolivian indigenous communities were executed with comprehensive free, prior and informed consent documentation, explicit acknowledgement of Bolivian sovereignty, clauses ensuring relevant authorities are informed. Clear language stating payment effectuated after ratification by competent authorities. Provisions for cultural exchange and sustainable development. These agreements comply with Bolivian Law Number 465 and ILO Convention 169 and the United Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. They are conservation partnerships endorsed by the indigenous leader who retains sovereignty under Bolivian's constitution. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism is not a signatory to these agreements. Article 403 recognizes indigenous nations' right to govern according to their own norms and institutions. Your claim that indigenous leaders were duped is patronizing and strips them of their agency. The claim that KAILASA affiliated leaders sent threatening message is categorically false. KAILASA maintains the highest standards of diplomatic conduct. We challenge you to produce evidences of these alleged threats. Similarly, claiming KAILASA's presence could lead to political civil conflict mischaracterizes our mission. Our engagement explicitly acknowledges host nations' sovereignty, promote cultural exchange, fostering peace, support sustainable development, create platform for indigenous voices internationally. Let's be crystal clear. These agreements between a US-based Hindu organization and indigenous community are conservation partnership, not land grabs. The long-term time frame reflects the commitment needed for environmental protection. Every agreement follows Bolivian law. Indigenous communities maintain full control. Bolivia's constitution states the integrity of indigenous territory is recognized, which includes the right to maintain and develop their own forms of economy, cultural and spiritual life. We protect environment, you exploit it. Unlike corporations pledging indigenous lands, KAILASA's approach centers on supporting indigenous sovereignty and environmental protection. Your double standard is obvious. When actual colonizers ravage ecosystems, you call it development. When indigenous communities collaborate on conservation, you call it fraud. Your defamatory claims violate Bolivian law number 045 against racism and all forms of discrimination, which prohibits defamation against indigenous communities. Your double standard is obvious. When actual colonizers ravage ecosystem, you call it development. When indigenous communities collaborate on conservation, you call it fraud. Your defamatory claims violate Bolivian law number 045 against racism and all forms of discrimination, which prohibits defamation against indigenous communities. Article 16 states, any form of racist or discriminatory behavior that humiliates, insults, or discredits a person or group based on their belonging to an indigenous nation will be sanctioned. Article 281 of Bolivian Penal Code criminalizes public defamation targeting indigenous communities. Your allegation that KAILASA is imposing a religion on indigenous people reveals ignorance of both indigenous spiritual tradition and KAILASA's approach. KAILASA recognizes deep philosophical commonalities between indigenous Amazonian cosmology and ancient Hindu knowledge. Reverence of nature as sacred, recognition of cosmic interconnectedness, spiritual connectedness to ancestral lands, holistic approach to health, preservation of ancient wisdom. The profound spiritual connection between Hindu traditions and indigenous Bolivian cosmology are extensively documented. The Indian deities Pachamama, Mother Earth, and the Tamil Hindu goddess Pacheamman shares not only parallel names but nearly identical attributes as Earth mothers who sustain life and ecological harmony. KAILASA has provided humanitarian support over 100 indigenous nations worldwide, funding environmental protection, poverty alleviation, women and children empowerment, free education and healthcare, cultural preservation. The Hindu genocide, the massacre of over 500 million Hindus, enslavement of over 4 million, manufactured famine killing over 160 million, stands as history's most ignored atrocity. KAILASA represents the revival of ancient tradition colonizers tried to eradicate. We demand an immediate apology and full correction. 5 major media organizations have already removed their defamatory articles against the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and KAILASA. Will any Bolivia choose truth or continue deception? Make no mistakes, your publication isn't merely incompetent journalism, it's a calculated attack on indigenous self-determination extending colonial oppression. KAILASA stands as an unshakable beacon of indigenous strength and cultural authenticity. We call on indigenous advocacy networks and human rights defenders to condemn this flagrant attack on indigenous sovereignty. Retract your lies or face consequences. The world is watching. Nithyananda.